the final version of Avengers Endgame didn't exactly line up with what was seen in the marketing materials, or even what was planned along the way. Because movies change, don't they, until they're out, and then they don't change, but even then, sometimes, they still change. That is a roundabout way of me saying, this video is the latest in a long series of videos that in the past has covered The Force Awakens, Civil War, Batman vs. a Superman, Logan, Infinity War, and that this one in particular will look at what didn't make the cut in Endgame, including some slight variations on Infinity War, which would have altered the course of the second movie. So why don't we start there? Because according to writers Stephen McFeely and Christopher Marcus, very early in development, the snap wasn't going to occur until the second film. There was even the consideration that the snap wouldn't have happened until the end of the first act of Endgame. So if I had to take a stab in the dark, I guess the original ending of Infinity War was something like this.
These rings are gigantic. You want to get them moving, you're going to need something a lot bigger to yank them.
However, it was Kevin Fieri who was all, hang on a second, I'm the boss. I mean, Bob Iger, head of Disney, he's the boss, but I'm the second boss, I guess. If you don't count other prominent board members and higher-ups of the company. But what I'm saying is, the snap has to be the ending of the first movie, as that's what we've been building to this entire time. This is apparently something he talked about for years, and was the reason for adapting Infinity War in the first place. That would mean the result could be the most shocking ending possible, and have audiences who are unaware of a follow-up film going, "Oh, Bucky, no!" Man, that Captain America is so handsome. Even in Unparalleled Grief, he looks amazing. Oh, bloody hell! Sorry, my microphone's fallen off the bloody microphone stand. What am I? The Hulk was also at one point to have his Professor Hulk transformation in Infinity War. If you remember, which you probably do, Bruce Banner and the Hulk throughout that film are having this internal battle concerning one being sick of having to come out and save the other. This leads to the reintroduction of the Hulkbuster suit. So right when everyone is down in the movie, at Wakanda, Bruce Banner and the Hulk reach a compromise to merge their personalities, and the Smolk was born. The writers loved this idea, however felt it happened at the wrong moment, so this was shelved until the following movie. There was also going to be a point in time where they were contemplating having Hawkeye's archery scene, the one that opens Endgame, present immediately after the snap. So snap, and then we cut to the Barton farm and his family disappearing. That would have been the very first indication that what has happened has had a wider effect. This apparently was shelved for two reasons. One, he hadn't appeared at all in the movie up until that point, and it was also thought that it would blunt the brutality of what Thanos did. Whilst we be on the topic of Hawkeye though, the moment where he and Black Widow are in that competition to see who can kill themselves the quickest, well in A Draft, it was Clint Barton who makes the leap. Jen Underdahl, visual effects producer, however, read the outline and said, "Hey, don't be taking this away from her." This response would resonate with Marcus, as it was Hawkeye taking the hit for Black Widow, and it was melodramatic to have him die and not get his family back, and it's only right and proper that she's done. And those are all of the initial ideas we know of for Endgame. Just kidding! There's so many more I've got for you. You've just been YouTube pranked. Like and subscribe, please. There were a number of other scenes that didn't make the cut. For one, Kevin Fieri's idea to include time travel. Sure, that made it in, but his idea was something along the lines of, yeah, you know what, I'd like to have time travel in this, maybe with the time stone or whatever, I don't know, you nerds figure it out. And they were like, well, maybe you're the nerd with your bloody Marvel hat all the time. And he was like, oh no! So McFeely and Marcus went away to come up with the kookiest thing imaginable that they could do with time that also doesn't break the movie. At one point they were thinking, are we really doing time travel? Then in looking at what they had available in the universe, they realized, character-wise, they hadn't really used Ant-Man yet. And with him comes the quantum realm, which could also be used for time manipulation. This of course was hinted at in Ant-Man and the Wasp.
And don't get sucked into a time vortex. We won't be able to save you.
So they already had this methodology that they could exploit that wouldn't introduce this weird game-breaking element at the last minute. But if we're talking weird and game-breaking elements, I want to hop back to Infinity War for a minute, because at one point they were going to introduce a character that no doubt would have reshaped Endgame. The Living Tribunal was to appear on Titan during that big fight. If you're not familiar with him, he's got like 3 faces, is more powerful than the combined force of all the Infinity Stones, and is the physical embodiment of all things across the multiple Marvel universes. Universi. I can understand why they thought though this would be a little too much, because in the writer's words it was said this would indicate a different level of architecture to the universe, and it was just too much to throw in. However, Marcus went on to add that the idea of this character is still in Marvel's and Kevin Fieri's court. So maybe somewhere down the line we get that movie where he turns up and is all, hey, you guys been messing around with time? Don't think I don't notice I got 3 faces, I see everything. Except of course, thing's directly behind me. That's a bit of a blind spot if I'm honest. I shouldn't have told you that. And speaking of time, you know that merry jaunt the Avengers have through it? Well, it was to go a little differently at various scripting stages. There was the idea to visit the Triskelion, which they would have dropped into in order to get the Tesseract. And there was also going to be a scene where someone gets into a car and drives to Doctor Strange's house. I'm not sure what time period this would have been. Maybe pre him becoming a wizard, or post, because, you know, then he'd have the time stone. Regardless, Doctor Strange has always kind of looked like a wizard. Is that just me? Look at his wizardy face. Also, the events on Asgard were going to be changed significantly. For one, Thor and Jane Foster were going to share more screen time than none, with the only footage we saw of her seemingly left over from Thor the Dark Thor. In fact, the events of Thor the Dark Thor, that's right, I'm doing that on purpose, would have replaced visiting the Avengers in 2012, because there is a moment in the MCU timeline where both the Ether and the Tesseract are present. This would also mean Tony Stark would end up in Asgard. But because he'd stick out like dog's balls, he was to be cloaked in a stealth Iron Man suit. But the thing is, Heimdall would have still been able to see him with his magic eyes, and what we would have got was a fight between the two of them. And if you thought there wasn't enough Nick Fury in this movie, well, at one point there was slightly more Nick Fury. In Visiting 2012, there were versions written with both him and Maria Hill rocking up. This ended up being Hydra double agents instead, led by Alexander Pierce's Robert Redford. Even after they got Robert Redford, there was this announcement that Robert Redford's last on-screen appearance was going to be in The Old Man and the Gun, but lo and behold, it's now a cameo in the movie Avengers Endgame, a film he probably has no idea what is happening in. Speaking with Taika Waititi about Ragnarok also informed some choices about Thor. They'd already decided on a certain version of the character, but then decided to integrate the level of humor he was playing with, and then pulled it into the psychological realism that the Russos like to filter everything through. They made him drunk and fat, is what I'm saying. Which I know some of is played for laughs, but I think it could be interpreted as, this is a broken man who's lost a lot, more than anything else. Endgame Thor at one point was also going to run into 2013 Thor the Dark Thor on Asgard, and he was going to go, what the hell happened to us? That though was removed due to the confusion of there already being one too many Thors in the movie. The A-Force moment, you know, the assembling of all the female superheroes, that was ummed and ahed about. The thinking was, is this delightful or is it pandering? And ultimately they liked it too much and it made the cut. But who didn't make the cut was Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, who at one point were also to take part in the final battle. Also, in case anybody was wondering, from the get-go the idea was that Steve Rogers would always get his dance with Peggy, and Iron Man was inevitably gonna die. Those two things always on the cards. Up until very late in the game, late in the Endgame, Avengers Endgame, Tony Stark didn't say anything before he snapped Thanos and his army out of existence. However, the directors felt this was weird and out of place, considering this is a character that lives and dies by quips. So they tried a bunch of different lines, and none of them really worked opposite Thanos's I am inevitable, until editor Jeff Ford said, why don't we just go full circle and have him say,
I am Iron Man.
and boom! They filmed it the next day, apparently. So they say maybe there was a slight delay, but that's what the Russos said. Also, if you do want to know what happened to Captain America in his second shot with Peggy Carter, well, Joe Russo has said that it will be revealed in the future. Maybe. Now, Marvel movies are renowned for misdirects in their marketing, and Endgame, whilst not being to the same extent of, say, Infinity War, still put out quite a bit of altered or missing scenes beforehand. Director Joe Russo said that this was all about preserving the narrative, the same way that when he saw The Empire Strikes Back as a kid, he was profoundly moved because he didn't know a darn thing about the story. The directors also look at trailers as a very different experience from the movie, because audiences can now look at a trailer and predict what's going to happen in a film. So because of this, these are some of the changes that were made. Black Widow firing a gun and Thor with his axe didn't appear at all. In fact, the entirety of the marketing materials didn't feature the final design for Thor. Even the seemingly leaked images were misdirects. This scene was altered so Steve Rogers had a darker suit and not his 2012 version, as to not give away time travel. Also, the handshake is gone. Instead, if you recall, it is replaced by them kissing passionately for 14 minutes. The moment where Scott Lang comes to the door, Black Widow has blonde hair instead of red. This is to disguise the 5-year time jump. Smolk was also removed from behind Rocket in this moment. Giant Man was removed from behind Rhodey and Rocket in this moment, and Mjolnir was removed from this scene to hide its reappearance in the franchise. Hulk and Thor were also removed from this hero shot to again hide the new incarnations of these characters, and the idea that Captain America's shield was shattered was changed in 2 separate moments. This one where he's lying on the ground, and this one with him strapping it to his wrist. In fact, he even has an open wound which he closes by tightening it all up which we only saw in the final movie. One last thing I want to talk about, it's not a deleted scene, but I feel it's important, and that is to like and subscribe. I cannot stress that enough, but what's even slightly less important than that is the interesting way in which Infinity War and Endgame were filmed. Probably aware of this, but they were done back to back, one directly after the other, over months and months of shooting. And in doing so, you get the actors much cheaper. Most of the core group, it costs tens of millions of dollars to have them return. So basically what you're doing, you're buying them for one movie instead of two. The studio is able to condense the work and punch it out at a lower cost. Financially, yes, this is preferable. However, this was found to be very taxing for the directors, who would have preferred more of a gap in between. But to that I say, you know, that's fair enough. I mean, Empire and Jedi, they were like 3 years apart. And there'll be 11 years between Avatar 1 and Avatar 2, if anyone cares. I mean, I know people make fun of Avatar, but genuinely, do you care about Avatar? Anyway, are there any deleted scenes or things that weren't included, or even some ideas of your own that you would have liked to have seen in this movie? Because that pretty much covers everything we know so far about what was missing from Avengers Endgame. But if you do want more Avengers Endgame stuff, well, you're in luck. There are multiple videos covering this on my channel. We got a post-credits one. We got an Easter eggs one. We got a confusing timeline one. We got a weird one where Thanos flies a helicopter one. Also, there's a full spoiler episode on Avengers Endgame from my podcast, The Weekly Planet, where we just get right into it. All that is linked below. There's also a few things in the works on this channel that you might be interested in. Not just Endgame. I mean, some of it, but other things. So subscribe if you want to see any and all of that. But in the meantime, I really appreciate you watching this. Take care.